This is the Obvious Podcast, episode 28. My name is Sonny Macon. I'm the COO of ABC Florida East Coast.
And my name is Peter Daiga. I'm the president and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors, Florida East Coast.
The Obvious Podcast is a production of ABC Florida East Coast. Unless otherwise stated, all content reflects the opinions of the guests and the hosts, which is us.
And if you like the Obvious Podcast, you can subscribe on all the major podcast platforms or watch the audiovisual version on YouTube. You can also follow the Obvious Podcast on Instagram, X, and Truth Social. And you can always reach out to us via email at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. Links to all the social media feeds are in this podcast show notes. And if you want to help others find the podcast, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. So, Sonny, I hear you have some data.
I have some data.
Podcast.
Thank you to Mr. Producer for connecting me with this data.
All right, I haven't seen this yet.
No,
so I'm excited to hearing what you got to say.
So this is data for the last 28 days.
Okay, 28 episodes or days?
28 days.
28 days. Okay. Just so happens those two corresponding today.
Yeah. Our channel got just under 700 views in the last 28 days.
Okay.
Our watch time, which went up 201%, was 108 hours. Our top performing episodes in the last 28 days were long-term benefits of Western civilization. Okay. That seemed to have resonated with our audience. And the second one was Doge and the bureaucrats. That also resonated with our audience. So got some great numbers. The audience continues to grow.
People seem to like it.
People are liking it.
Impromptu conversations that we have a lot here. We were talking right before the recording. We want to invite you all. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear Sonny and I talk about, let us know. Just email us that topic at the obvious at abceastflorida.com. So
I do want to share some more analytics. 8.3 thousand impressions in the last 28 days.
It's great. Who would have ever thought?
Yeah.
This has succeeded much more than I actually anticipated when I think you proposed, first doing this. And so I hope it just continues to grow, our audience, and that we continue to entertain, right? I think entertainment's got to be part of this.
Yeah. If it's not interesting, what's the point, right?
Exactly. So,
and obviously none of this would happen without our audience. So we want to thank them for watching. And
yes, thank you. What are we going to talk about and entertain today about, Sonny?
So today I want to talk about property taxes.
Property taxes.
Our governor, Mr. Ron DeSantis.
Session is in full swing.
Right
now.
We will be in Tallahassee soon to meet with our legislatures as well. But he's been out there giving some speeches talking about how property taxes are an unconstitutional idea and they need to go away. And his whole premise is sort of based on...
Wow, somebody said it.
A
lot of people...
I've been saying it for years.
Right?
And he basically said, look, you're buying a property with the money that's already been taxed. But then, to stay in that house, even if you pay it off, you have to pay the government every year. Right? And if you don't pay it, you lose the house. So how is that house ever really yours?
Yeah.
Right?
We don't sometimes like hard questions or obvious questions, right? But those are some really hard, obvious questions. You really own it if they can take it away from you at any time for not paying the tax.
Which is why I love the name of our show, right? So, we want to talk about things that are maybe not discovered, but they're obvious if you start to think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, there's going to be 1,000,001 objections, right? I mean, funding government and...
schools and roads and...
Of course, the kids. Don't forget the kids.
Yeah, the kids, the firefighters, and the police.
Yeah. So
every time, right?
And he's not suggesting that we close down government.
No, of course not.
As, by the way, neither are people who are wanting some efficiencies in government today, and people who have been in charge of that to try to find waste, fraud, and abuse. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't believe that government, I may have mentioned in previous podcasts about my political development as a young man. I flirted with libertarianism, but I came to or I concluded that, the Democrat Party is more on the side of government as the solution to everything, and libertarians are kind of on the side of government as the solution to nothing.
Yep.
And I feel like as a Republican, and again, the people that right now are working through government and trying to find efficiencies, it's not that they're trying to close it down. They're trying to find ways of them being more efficient. The Libertarian Party might be trying to close them down. The Democrats might be arguing for it doesn't matter how it's spent or how wasteful and fraudulent it is. There is no government spending that isn't good. So the governor is not arguing, that we got to cut. He's just making an argument that we have maybe find a different way of funding it, a more constitutional, a more fair way of funding it.
I'm going to go back to the point you just made and basically say that's why I have never been a fan of Ayn Rand, right? This idea that only the profit motive makes everything efficient and effective and useful for society, I think is flawed, right? I get it. She was a godless Russian or whatever. I get that. But I find some things like defense are past a profit motive, right? Now, obviously you need the efficiencies of a profit-driven enterprise. I get that. But you can't, there's some things that are sort of not transnational, but like really trans capitalism.
Sure.
And I think defense is one of those issues.
Sure, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So
I do believe in some taxation, of course.
Sure. So I haven't been following this real close, but what are some of the arguments that he's laid out? Like, for example, is the issue, and again, this is the way negotiations sometimes work, especially with the art of the deal and the man currently in the national in the presidency, that you might start here because you're going to have to come down to here. So maybe that's his thinking. Like, for example, is the thought that whatever you buy the house at, that's the amount you could ever be taxed at. This fake value as it goes up until you sell it, you really don't realize. Yet the government continues to tax you at this unrealized value of your house.
Before we get into that, can I ask you a question? Do you remember what we used to call property taxes back in the medieval times?
No.
Feudalism.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
That thought has been in my head that it's really a modern version of feudalism. So I got really curious because I wanted to know.
Well, don't even get me started there. There are some people that argue we were better off during those times.
Yeah,
right? I mean, people had more vacation, more time off. The city would close down for religious celebrations and holidays and any event. People actually had a life. As opposed to anyway. Just for another.
That's another episode.
So, but I'm just curious: is it that, or is it also while you're paying the mortgage? Maybe you can be taxed, but once it's paid off, you're done.
Yeah.
You've paid your mortch, you've paid your taxes on it during that lifespan. I don't know if he's pushing one or the other or in general. And by the way, I also was trying to do some quick research before we came on, and I wasn't able to complete it. But I don't know if is he proposing like the sales tax, be the substitute for the property tax. And I'm wondering what 1% increase in sales tax generates in the state of Florida versus.
Well, we get 90 million visitors a year.
Correct.
Right? So Florida is such a perfect economy. I remember 20 years ago, Marco Rubio, when he was Speaker of the House, had this idea. He wanted to eliminate property taxes. Remember that?
Yeah.
But he was only proposing it for homesteaded properties, all homesteaded. So non-homestead commercial was kind of.
And I don't remember why it just like a lot of legislative things.
Charlie Crist.
That's right. If you don't have the governor or the Senate, the other chamber, on your side, it's generally going to go nowhere. So, but he first. You're right. That's a very good memory.
He brought that up. I remember years ago thinking, what a brilliant idea that was, because that's great for the. I mean, think about how many people can't afford a home because they can't afford taxes and insurance. Even if you're able to get past the mortgage hurdles. You're able to get the financing, but taxes and insurance kill deals. And so
tax and insurance is probably, by the way, equal to the principal that most people pay, I would say, or more. I mean, think about that. You're paying more to the government and for your insurance than the actual cost, including interest to the bank for the house that you.
Yeah. So I got really blessed in an inadvertent way. So I was able to. I bought a house when mortgage rates were 3.1. I paid 3.1% interest rate, and of course now I'm locked into my house. My taxes and insurance are greater than my mortgage payment.
Yep.
And to me that's insane. And to me, what's insane is the fact that they can base property taxes on the value of the house. Like, why?
Sure.
Just because your house is worth more doesn't mean you're consuming.
And I think you and I have talked about this in other programs too. Does the person with $1 million home get that much more that they pay in property taxes than someone with a?
Are they using the police more?
Right.
Are they using?
Do they get more a wider sewer pipe? Or I don't know.
To me, that's unconstitutional right off the bat, right? Like the idea that
this is crazy talk, Sonny.
And
this is crazy talk.
That just because the value of your house goes up, something the government had nothing to do with. Now you could argue, well, they maintain the civil society and the roads and all of that. I get it, but technically, they really haven't done anything for the market valuation to move, right? That's a function of macro.
How serious do you think this is, though? Is this just a political? Does he have any support from a legislative perspective? Or is this just, again, like Rubio, he started a conversation and maybe he's just trying to take it a step further?
Rubio, I remember, clearly wanted 15% sales tax and basically said that 15% sales tax, because we are such a tourist-driven economy. We have so many visitors. Yeah. The consumption tax of 15%.
You know why I remember that so well? Is because I remember my thinking through it logically back then as a person. And, wow, 15% sales tax is really high. But then I realized, if you wanted to, you don't have to buy those big purchases, which is where that 15% is mostly going to hit you. You don't have to buy that new car. Yeah. You don't have to buy that, I don't know, boat, or whatever. And chances are, if you were buying those things, you probably could afford the 15% anyway. So, or 15% on a new Prius or I don't know, Accord is going to be different from 15% on a Mercedes or something like that.
Absolutely.
And I remember, that was where I worked myself through it and said, I can get behind this, because of what it would mean to the average person, home ownership, the percent of home ownership, so.
And it makes home ownership, I mean, think about all the senior citizens we have that are on fixed income, all right? Imagine if they didn't have to worry about their property taxes and the fact that they don't lose their home, that they've paid off, that they worked hard.
So, but back to my point, how serious do you think he is in this? Have you done, I don't know.
He sounds serious. I don't know how likely it is to pass or to get anywhere. I think local governments will lose their mind, if anything. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story. That's something I read yesterday. And it made me, I got so angry. Clearly a New York transplant responded. Somebody posted a link to Ron DeSantis's press conference where he talks about this issue.
Okay.
Right? And so this guy who I don't know.
So this was not one of the right of center New Yorkers that moved on because of this. Is one of
no.
Okay.
He and this is how this was the analogy he used. He said this proposal is like eating at a 5-star restaurant, and I got angry right there. I'm like, really? You're going to compare local governments to 5-star restaurants?
Right.
And then leaving without paying the check.
But again, it's a red herring, right? We already started early on talking about how nobody's arguing the shutting down the government or not fighting it. We're talking about, is there a better way of doing it?
Is there a better way to do this?
Than through property taxes.
And the left will say that taxes on consumption are taxes on poor people, which blows my mind because rich people consume too, and so does the middle class. Everybody consumes.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's always been part of even with the sales tax in Florida, is how inequitable or how poor it is. But keep in mind, in Florida, certain things are exempt.
Yeah. A lot of basic foods are exempt.
Basic food items are exempt.
I used to live in Illinois. Guess what?
I think
they taxed milk and eggs.
Healthcare exempt.
Healthcare is exempt. So bread, milk. Eggs, basic utility, basic
now
groceries.
your dum-dums or Twinkies or whatever, you're going to get taxed on the sales tax. But I mean, basic food items, vegetables and fruits and things like that. Tax. So this idea somehow that a sales tax is less equitable, because this is usually their argument when they're pushing for an income tax. They don't like the fact that Florida, the liberals, leftists, don't like the fact that Florida doesn't have an income tax. So they argue that the sales tax is less equitable than income tax. So, but in any event, they always leave out the important fact of Florida sales tax has certain things that are exempt. Mm-hmm. So it's actually it's a quite fair, if you ask me, always has been, sales tax.
And again, a state with 90 million visitors. Think about all the visitors who come, who use the restaurants, pay for the hotels, rent cars, and rent all this kind of stuff. Sure. Who spend money here, who are paying a consumption tax on everything they're consuming of 15%. I mean, that's a lot of money coming in, right?
Yep.
And each county can sort of.
I look forward to the progression of this conversation, and I hope it stokes a really good conversation at the legislative level.
I do too.
And I'd love to see the data on what 1% every increase of 1% of sales tax statewide brings in
the revenue.
Because what would happen is they would send out whatever they to the local governments to based on maybe the sales tax there, maybe not. Maybe it's a way as well to do something that's a favorite of the left of center folks, which is counties that are drawing or paying more in sales tax to subsidize the more rural counties or the counties that maybe need help. So
it's just never enough for them.
Well, of course not.
No amount of money, no amount of taxation.
Well, we've seen that with the national argument or debate or conversation about waste, fraud, and abuse. Again, we've talked in the past about how this president has a way of picking a 90-10 issue and getting the left and the Democrats to argue for the 10%. I mean, they're actually out there arguing that no, really, we should have spent that money on whatever, these crazy programs.
The Trans Opera in Colombia.
Right, on and on and on. Really? Have we come to that we can't even agree as a country that's something that we don't need to be spending money on?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to believe.
And I think it's because it's if it's Trump's name, they're going to
kudos to our governor. For
at least having a conversation about this. Yeah,
so absolutely
putting this back into the public. And I so wish, I can't even imagine how the people who are leaving Florida because they find the taxes and the insurance unaffordable. Right? I can't even imagine how many would have stayed had Marco Rubio succeeded 20 years ago.
Sure.
And I think about, my parents are moving because the taxes and insurance are too much.
That's a great question.
And it's just
ponder on.
Yeah, but I think it's great for Florida. And I think we need to talk about the constitutionality of it all, right? Like,
what about, let's take, from the maybe even in womb, in utero, all the different taxes that you may start to pay in some way. And you go through life, paying an income tax on your income you make. And then on what you get, which is a fraction of what you earned, you're going to pay when you buy something.
Yeah, everything you see here on the screen, this laptop was paid for by money that was taxed.
Right.
And then there was an additional tax paid on the laptop itself.
Right.
Based on the value of the laptop.
Right.
Right? Like, how does that make any sense?
And I think we've also talked in past programs or alluded to, and then you have, which is bugged and been the subject of a conversation amongst me and some of my friends for decades, you pay the gas tax in order to build the road.
And what am I being told?
So then there's the tolls to pay for it, and then there's the parking space to pay for the pavement that you already paid for.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing to be having a conversation about the excess. As opposed to, what I think the people left of center and our Democrat friends would probably rather have a conversation about is what more can we tax? What additional thing is moving still? My God, they tax us in death even, right? The old death tax.
Yeah, where you're collecting money that was already taxed when it was income, right? Yeah. I remember Biden, pay your fair share, and then his son doesn't pay his fair share, and he's writing off prostitutes and all this other stuff.
And I won't be able to recall the actual percentages off the top of my head, but something like the top 1 or 3% of taxpayers pay like 50% of the tax bill, I think, or something outrageous, something crazy.
I think it's top 3% pay 50% of all taxes.
Yeah. So what exactly is fair? We have a different idea of what fair is, I think.
Yeah.
Us and sometimes people on the left. We did want to mention that you should have already gotten in the mail, but if you haven't seen it, we'd like to invite you to text us. Text the word Succes to area code 754-432-3186, and you will find a link where you can get a digital copy of our 2024 Year in Success. So this is a great summary of all the amazing things that your membership has allowed and is allowing our chapter to do on behalf of the industry, the different ways that we've succeeded in the previous year from a government affairs and education and a membership events story. So you should have gotten that in the mail. If you haven't seen it and would like a copy, just again, text the word Succes, Success, to area code 754 432-3186, and we'll get you a digital copy. Or you can email us at the obvious
At
at
ABC.
abceastflorida.com, and we'd be happy to drop one in the mail to you if you'd like us to mail you
A great episode. Thank you for listening and honoring us with your time.
What do you think? Do you think we can find a way to do away with property taxes? Or do you have another subject that you'd like us to talk about? Send us an email. All right? Until next time, thanks for listening. Ciao.